Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Ruth, 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel. And this week, 1 Kings, 2 Kings, 1 Chronicles, 2 Chronicles. Awesome. So those are your books that you're testing on this week, 1 Kings all the way to 2 Chronicles. All right, second grade, let's try our scripture. We're not testing on it until next week, but let's try it. John 10:10.
The thief does not come except to steal, kill, and destroy. But I have come that they may give life more abundantly.
Good. Yes, John 10:10. Awesome. So good. It seems like we're still learning and practicing. Awesome job. Okay. So let's go ahead and get into our lesson for today. So on Tuesday, we talked about this man that God called out of Ur. His name was Abram. The Lord called him out of Ur, and God wanted to bring him to a new land, a promised land that would not only be for Abram, but that would also be for his descendants as well. So the Lord called Abram. Abram followed wherever God brought him, and God led him to the land of Canaan, which that was the name of it at that time. It was called the land of Canaan, the promised land. And that is where Abram was. Remember, we discussed how a famine hit the land and he ended up leaving and went to Egypt. The Lord did not tell him to go, but he went to Egypt and he ended up being led back to the promised land. So in yesterday's lesson, we discussed how when Abram left, he didn't leave with just his wife, but he also left with his father and his nephew, Lot. His father did die on the way there, but his nephew Lot stayed with him. But as Abram began to become more and more blessed, he had more animals, he had a lot more servants. Lot also had his own animals and his own servants. There was not enough land for both of them to live on. So Abram decided that it would be best for him and Lot to separate, especially when their servants started to have disagreements. Abram was like, Lot, it is best that we separate. So Abram and Lot decided that they would, leave one another. So Abram gave Lot the choice to pick which part of the land he wanted to be in. Did he want to go in the mountains, or would he rather stay in the plains, in the grass? And Lot chose to stay in the plains. And I told you that was because that was the better part of the land, and also because they had some cities nearby, which were Sodom and Gomorrah, and Lot knew that that would be the best part for him to stay in. Now, if you remember, the land was really promised to Abram. So Lot, he really didn't have a choice. But Abram let him pick, and that's where he chose. So we'll pick up today after Lot and Abram separate. Let's go ahead and go into what happens next. So Abram and Lot decided to separate from one another. Abram stayed in the mountains, and Lot stayed in the plain. After Lot was gone, the Lord came to Abram, and he told Abram, he says, Abram, look out across the land. And especially because Abram was in the mountains, he could really see like the land. And so the Lord told Abram, he says, look out at the land, all of it. He says, as far as your eyes can see, I will give this to you and all your descendants. This land right here, I will give to all of your descendants. And this was not just a little piece of land. This was a lot of land the Lord was going to give him. He says, I will give you so many in your family, like the dust, they can't even be counted. Have you ever picked up dust before? Can you count each grain of dust? No, of course not. It's just so many. And that's exactly what the Lord was telling him, that he would give him so many descendants. He says, Abram, it won't just be you and your wife Sarai. No, you're going to have descendants, meaning a lot of family will come from you, Abram. So that's why the Lord said, look out at all the dust. That's how much I will give you. So that means it will be so many, so much you can't even count it. Then Abram, he worshiped the Lord. So then the Lord took Abram outside his tent and told him, he says, fear not, Abram. He says, I am your shield and your reward. He says, look up into the sky. He says, you see all the stars, Abram? He says, that's how many descendants I will give you. As many stars there is in the sky. Now, we can't count all the stars. We can only count the ones that we can kind of see, but there are some that we can't even see. But the Lord told Abram, he says, I will give you that many descendants, like the stars in the sky, which means a lot, basically, right? That means the Lord is going to give him a lot of descendants, a bunch, probably millions of people were going to come after Abram. And so the Lord promised him this. This is a promise that God is giving him. And when God gives a promise, that means it will happen. God does not go back on his promises at all. When he says that he will do something, guess what? He's going to do it. He doesn't say, you know what, I think I'm going to change. No, he told Abram this, and this is exactly what the Lord would do. And so time passed. So Abram, of course, told his wife Sarai this promise that he would give him this son. This descendants. And then the Lord also promised to Abram that he would give him a son. Now that was actually what Abram needed, right? They had no children. Him and his wife are pretty old at this time, and they still didn't have kids. So yes, God is promising Abram descendants, but Abram has to have a child first, right? In order to have descendants. So they had no children and they were kind of old, but the Lord told him, I will give you descendants like the dust and the stars, and I will also give you a son whom all these descendants will come through. So this is a promise that the Lord gave to Abram as well. Not only would he have a lot of descendants, but God was going to give them a son soon. And so they're old. And so Abram is like, ooh, I don't know, Lord, but he believes what God is saying, that he will give them a son, even in their old age. So Abram tells his wife Sarai all of this. And time goes on. There, the Lord gives the promise. They don't see the promise the next day. They don't even see it the next year, the next 2 years. And they're not getting younger as time goes on. Abram and Sarai are getting older, right? We don't get younger as time goes on. We get older. And so they're still waiting on that promise that God said. They're like, okay, well, God did promise us he was going to give us a son so that we could have descendants. But it's kind of taking a long time. So Sarai felt like she was tired of waiting. She was like, you know what? This is kind of taking a little too long. I'm tired of waiting on the Lord. Let me go ahead and help God out. Now, does God need our help for anything?
No.
Now, he does use people to, for his glory to be revealed, but the Lord doesn't need us to help him. He is an all-powerful God, and when he wants something done, he can do it on his own. And with this promise that he gave to Abram and Sarai, he was going to do it. It was just going to be at his time. So that's another thing about the Lord. Yes, he can give a promise, but he fulfills the promise, meaning he completes it whenever it's time, his time. He doesn't move because we're ready or we think it's time. The Lord does things on his own time. Have your parents ever told you they were going to get something or buy you something, but you just had to wait for them to bring you? You had to wait for the right time for them to bring you? Though you might have wanted it that moment, your parents were like, not today. Maybe tomorrow, maybe next week. Has anybody had that happen? Where you had to wait for something? Well, that's exactly how the Lord is. He does the same thing. He moves on his time. He doesn't do it when we feel like we want it to be done. He does it at his time. So yes, he did give Abram and Sarai the promise. They just had to wait for it. But Sarai was tired of waiting. She was like, I don't feel like waiting anymore. I'm going to help the Lord out. So she had a servant that would serve her. Her name was Hagar. Okay. She had this servant named Hagar, and she thought it would be a good idea for Abram and Hagar to have a baby. And when they would have the baby, they would give the baby to Sarai and Abram. So she tells Abram, she says, I need you to have this baby with Hagar, because when you have the baby with Hagar, she's going to give the baby to us, and that will be our son that God promised us. Could that be the son that God promised them? No. It can't, right? Because it will come the way that God wants the son to come, not the way that they want it to come. But Sarai thought that this was a great idea. So that's exactly what she did. She asked Abram to have a baby with Hagar, which he did. And they had this new baby, this son. Hagar had the baby, and she named him Ishmael. That's what she named his son, Ishmael. So they had this kid. Now, the problem with that is Abram's excited. He has a son. He's a father. But guess what? This is not the promised son This is not the son that God said descendants would come after. This is not that son. Yes, they did their own thing and had that son, but that was not the way that God wanted it to go. So even though they did this is not God's way. And so Abram loved Ishmael. He did. That was his son. But Ishmael was not the one that God told Abram this son was the one. So it didn't work. It did not work. And that's why we just gotta wait. Even though I know it's hard sometimes to wait. It might be hard sometimes because it might feel like it's taking forever. But the Lord is faithful and he will always do what he says. And if he said that he will do it, it might just take some time, but he'll let it happen. And I'm telling you, when it happens, it's like, man, that's awesome. And it'll feel like you didn't even have to wait for it long. And that's what it will really feel like. And so Abram and Sarai, they made this mistake of having this son, but God will still bless Ishmael. It's just Ishmael is not that promised son. The promised son that will get the land, that's not Ishmael. So the Lord appears, so years go by, Ishmael grows up, he's just not the promised son, but he's still loved by his father. So when Abram was 99 years old, the Lord appeared to Abram again. And he says, I am the Almighty God, and I will make a covenant between me and you, Abram. So a covenant is an agreement. So God told Abram, I want to make an agreement with you. Okay? And when you make a covenant, you cannot break it. You have to both ends have to be kept. So whatever God told Abram he was going to do, he's going to keep his end, and Abram has to keep his promise. And we'll learn about more covenants when we get into Moses, how the Lord makes agreements with people. And so the Lord told Abram, he says, I will multiply you and you will be the father of many nations. Because remember, a lot of descendants are going to come after Abram. So the Lord said, Abram, I'm going to change your name. You will no longer be called Abram. Does anyone know what his new name is?
No.
No? Abraham.
I know.
Abraham. Now, have you heard of Abraham in the Bible? That's who we're talking about. His name used to be Abram. Yes, his name used to be Abram. But when the Lord is appearing to him right now, he changes his name to Abraham. And Abraham means father of many nations. So the Lord is making this a covenant, this agreement with Abraham, and he changes his name. Now his name is Abraham. So that's who we've been talking about this whole time. Okay? He says, your name will be Abraham, which means father of many nations. So not only does the Lord change Abraham's name, he says, but your wife, her name is going to be changed as well. She's going to be known as the mother of many nations. And I will change her name too. Does anyone know?
No.
Sarah. Her name will now be Sarah. So her name is no longer Sarai, but her name is now Sarah. So the Lord is making that promise. He says, Abram, your name is changed to Abraham, which means father of many nations. And he says, Sarai, your name is changed to Sarah, which means mother of many nations. Then the Lord told him something else. He says, Abraham, I did not forget my promise that I gave to you years ago. He says, I'm going to keep my promise. He says, I will give your wife a son. Yes, in her old age. Sarah is 90 years old at this time. 90, y'all. And the Lord said, I will give her a son. She will have a son. No, she will not need anyone to help her or anything. She is going to have this son because I am going to give her this son at 90 years old. And so Abraham's like, whoa. So the Lord is going to keep his promise. He told this to Abraham at first years ago. And now the Lord is like, it's going to happen now. And so next week we'll talk about it. But he says, it's going to happen now. At 90, I will give her a son. And so the Lord told him, now this son, he says, I'm going to tell you exactly what to name this son. He says, you're going to name this son that I will give to your wife, Sarah. You will name him Isaac. That will be his name. His name is going to be Isaac. And so the Lord did say that, Ishmael would be blessed, but that wasn't the promised son. This is the promised son, Isaac. This will be his name. His name would be Isaac. And so that's the covenant that God made, the agreement that he made with Abraham. He changed his name. He changed his wife's name, and he also gave him the promise of his son, and God even told him what to name his son, and the name would be Isaac. So God did also tell him he would bless Ishmael as well, but through Sarah's son, Isaac, that's when the nations would come through that son. Okay? So the Lord is keeping his promise that he would give them a son. And so much so, the Lord even tells them what they're going to name that son. So you think God is going to keep his word?
Yeah.
Of course he will. And like I said, it might take time, but the Lord is going to keep his promise. And we see how God is about to do the impossible, because Sarah is 90 years old at this point, and she's about to have this baby. God is going to give her this son. So next week, we'll talk about it, and we'll discuss how when Sarah's going to hear this, what she's going to do, like her response to having a child at this age, right? But you know, the Lord can do it at any time, however he wants to do it, he will do it. Okay, so that's our Bible lesson today on God's promise for Abraham and Sarah, that he would give them a son and what the son would be named, and also just about how Sarah was tired of waiting and what she did and how that was not okay. You know, they had Ishmael, and although Ishmael is the son of Abraham, the Lord will still bless him, but the real blessing comes through Isaac. Okay? Yes? How does that sound?
Good.
Good. Great. Okay. Awesome. Okay. All right. So guys, thank you for joining us. For Bobby, you have a question, Solomon?
Isn't there an Abraham song?
Yeah, Father Abraham had many sons. That song. That's the song you're talking about? And many sons had father. Yeah. Yeah, that is the song. I don't know it all the way. I just know that's like part of it. Yeah. But I think it's called Father Abraham. So you can probably ask your parents to put it on for you.
I never heard that song. I heard it in Miss Mama's car.
Okay.
No, I just heard it.
All right. So is everybody good?
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah. All right.
Yes.
Sounds good. So it was great seeing you all today. So we do have our phonics test today. You can log on. I think it's 11:40 here, Central Standard. I think 12:40. It's on Google Classroom. For first grade and then second grade, I believe yours is at noon. So just ask your parents to check to make sure those times are right. And you can log in for the phonics test today. If not, I'll have the video up for you, okay? And our lessons from yesterday and Tuesday are up. So if you want to go over those to kind of review